Hello everyone, this is Hidden Planet X. Time to do another deck tech. Although this one's a little special. This is my Horde deck. Me and my friends like to play Horde Magic, which some of you might not be familiar with. Horde Magic officially is supposed to have a 100 card deck, and where the deck is autonomous and you basically use a bunch of different tokens and you flip over until you hit a creature. They have infinite mana, and all creatures have haste and attack if fail. If you're not familiar with the format, I suggest you really look it up. It's a really fun format, especially if you don't really want to go like people that don't like to really be competitive against other players. This is a team format where you play with players against the Horde. So with this, I'll start off with the non-token creatures and then move on to token creatures. So in my play group, we all play commander instead of 60 cards. So each horde deck has a boss monster and a general. The boss monster only comes out once the deck has been emptied and drops immediately. It does not use the stack and cannot be countered. And then it also has the general. Our ruling is the general's it has a turn count, so each turn it ticks down by 1 from its CMC. So Maelstrom Wanderer has 8 CMC, so every one of the Horde's turn, it ticks down. It also ticks down individually for whenever a commander is cast. That's not if a commander is cast, it's when. So if you cast your commander multiple times, it'll tick down each time. So this is a tribal-ish theme around elementals, as you can see from Maelstrom Wanderer and Horde of Notions. So I'll go over the general first. Maelstrom Wanderer, 5 blue, red, green for a 7/5 legendary creature elemental. Other creatures you control have haste, not so great. All creatures in Horde have haste, but it has Cascade. So in this, my ruling when playing it is, again, you can make your own rules, is whenever a Cascade trigger happens, it cascades it can't cascade token creatures. So it'll cascade till it hits a non-token. So next up, the boss monster, Horde of Notions, 5 mana Wooburg for a 5/5 elemental, vigilance, trample, haste, and for Wooburg, you may play target elemental card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. Now, I was considering this to be its general, but I found that if no one has a way to kill their graveyard, when this drops, it brings everything back because Hordes have infinite mana at all times. So this is why it's the boss monster and not the general. Next up, we'll just go down. There are creatures, enchantments, and stuff in here, because I haven't really ordered the deck lists, but we'll start Ashenmoor Liege. 1 and 3 red, black. I'm blanking on the names. Hybrid mana for a 4/1 elemental knight. Other black creatures get +1/+1. Other red creatures get +1/+1. And whenever this becomes targeted with a spell or ability, the opponent loses 4 life. So it's just a really good aggressive card. There aren't that many black elementals, but most of your elementals are red. So next up, Caterwauling Boggart, 3 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. It's one of the few non-elementals, but each Goblin has menace and each elemental has menace. I mean, that's with a new keywording. So it makes all your elementals really hard to block. And again, the Horde's trying to kill you, so it's trying to be as aggressive as possible. Next up, Cinderbones. Not the most aggressive card. It's 2 and a black for a 1/1 elemental skeleton with Wither, and 1 and a black regenerate. This is really, it just kind of pokes you out, and you really can't kill it. You don't really want to block it either. Next up, Cradle Elemental. 2 and a red for a 0/6 elemental with pay red, sack it, deal 4 damage to target creature. Formidable, it becomes an 8/6 till end of turn. So normally it's going to have Formidable and it's going to be an 8/6 and it's just going to crash in. If not, if the general is out, the Horde acts intelligently, so it can destroy creatures, but most of the time it's just going to be swinging as an 8/6. Next up, Creeper Hulk. This one I'm a little worried about for power-wise. It can be really game-ending, and it can end the game really quickly. 3 and double green for a 5/5 plant elemental with trample. And for 1 and a green, until end of turn, target creature you control with has base power and toughness of 5/5 and gains trample. So it makes all your elementals 5/5s with trample. That's really good. All those 1/1s that we have in the deck become 5/5s. So this I might see cutting in case it just ends the game too quickly. Next up, Din of the Fire Herd, 5 and 3 black-red hybrids for a sorcery. Put a 5/5 black elemental token onto play. Target opponent sacrifices a creature for each black creature and sacrifices a land for each red creature. So, yeah, well, it'll only hit one person. It's pretty devastating. So, next up, Elemental Appeal, 4 red mana for a sorcery with kicker 5. Put a 7/1 elemental with trample and haste on the battlefield. Exile it at next end step. If it was kicked, it gets additional +7/+0. So it's basically a 14/1 trample haste. So it just basically a kick in the teeth if you're unprepared. Next up, Elemental Mastery. One of the newer includes 3 and a red for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchant creature has tap, put X 1/1 red elemental creatures with haste into play, where X is the number of the creature's power. Remove them from the game at end of turn. So again, it makes it going wide, and with things like Creeper Hulk, it can be really devastating. Ember Swallower, 2 and a red for a 4/5 elemental with 5 and 2 red for Monstrosity 3. When it becomes monstrous, each player sacrifices 3 lands.
I'm probably gonna hang out.
Okay. So.
Who are you talking with?
I'm recording a video.
Oh.
Yeah, say hi to the non-existent audience.
Hi.
Okay.
Hey, if I play with my boom score, they'll probably get used to me.
Sorry about that. I had some guests visiting, but again, this is really devastating. Unless you're really late game, it hits every player, and the Horde doesn't have any lands, so sacking 3 lands and it becomes a 7/8 is pretty hard to deal with.
Take care of water, buddy.
I will. Okay. Next up, Everlasting Torment, 2 and a black-red hybrid. For an enchantment, players can't gain life. Damage cannot be prevented. All damage is dealt through Wither, basically. So it makes it makes people not want to chump block, and it just makes it so they can't really stall out with life gain. Next up, Fusion Elemental, Wooburg for an 8/8 elemental. Again, kind of a classic card. A beat stick. It doesn't really have trample, but it kills things. Next up, Hate Flare, 5 and 2 red for a 5/5 with Wither. You can pay 2 and a red and untap it to deal its power to target creature or player. Most of the time, if the Horde is unintelligent, it will go straight to the face. If not, it can be a removal source. Next up, Hell's Thunder, 1 and 2 red for a 4/4 flying haste. Beginning of the end step, sacrifice Hell's Thunder, and it has Unearth for 4 and a red. Flying, not really anything other than that. Incandescent Soulstroke, 2 and a red for a 2/2 that lords elementals. That's basically the only effect. The other effect doesn't really matter. Ingot Chewer, 4 and a red for a 3/3 elemental. When it enters, destroy target artifact. Players always have artifacts out, so it's always going to hit. Oh, sorry if you can hear that. I've got some of my sweet mates outside. But Kolrath Knight, 3 and 2 black-red hybrid for a 3/3 with flying and wither, and creatures your opponents control with counters on them can't attack or block. So that also includes +1/+1 counters or any other counters. So again, makes people not really want to block this, and there is a slight wither sub-theme, so it's just a nice thing. It makes things not be able to block it. Next up, Living Hive, 6 and double green for a 6/6 with trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it puts that many 1/1 green insect creature tokens into play. So On an unprotected board, this will multiply really quickly. Next up, Maelstrom Nexus, Wooburg for enchantment. The first spell has Cascade. So that is non-token spell, just to remind everyone. Malignus, 3 and double red for a star, where its power and toughness are equal to half the highest life total, rounded up, and damage from it cannot be prevented. So, it again, against an unprotected board, it swings in and does a lot of damage. Next up, Mournwelk. It's one of the more unimpressive things when it comes into play. Target opponent discards 2 cards as a 3/3. I might think cutting it just in case, but it's one of those low impact cards for the beginning of the game. Next up, Necroskitter, 1 and double black for a 1/4 with Wither. Whenever a creature an opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter on it dies, you may return that card to the battlefield under its control. So, again, no one really likes blocking a 1/4, and if anything with -1 counters die, say from any of the other Wither creatures, it'll come back under their control. So, fun card. This is another card I thought of cutting. It's a 2/3 flyer for 3 and a blue. Whenever it leaves play, put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library. So it plows under when it dies. Nova Chaser, 3 and a red for a 10/2 trample elemental warrior with champion and elemental. My ruling is if it champions a token, the token will come back into play. But again, really hard to deal with, especially if it comes out early game. Next up, Obelisk of Erd, 6 mana artifact with Convoke, doesn't really matter. When it enters, choose a creature type, always going to be elemental. Creatures of the chosen type get +2/+2. Really back-breaking, sorry about that, if it comes out early, because it's really hard to deal with all that pump. Next up, Obsidian Fireheart, 1 and triple red for a 4/4 with 1 and a red. Put a blaze counter on target land. If it has a blaze counter at the beginning of upkeep, that land deals 1 damage to you. This continues even after they've killed the Obsidian Fireheart. So that basically means all their lands that are currently in play get a blaze counter and start killing them really quickly. Even if it hits 6 lands, that's 6 a turn for everyone. So if you're playing 3 players, that's 18 damage a turn. So, oh, by the way, I'm not listing how many I include, but again, you should be able to see that. Next up, Omnath, Locus of Rage, 3 double red, double green for a 5/5 with landfall. That's not really going to happen. Whenever it or another elemental creature you control dies, Omnath deals 3 to target creature or player. So he comes out, and when you kill him, he's going to hurt. Next up, Overrun, 2 and triple green. Creatures get +3/+3 and trample. Again, you play this out with a few of your elementals that are 3/1s. They become 6 4s. Sorry about that. 6 4s with trample. Really hard to deal with. Savage Firecat, 3 and 2 red for a 7/7 trample. The Horde doesn't have any lands, so it can never remove counters, so it's just a 7/7 with trample. Seed Guardian, 2 and 2 green for a 3/4 elemental with reach. When it dies, you put an XX green elemental token into the battlefield where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So, late game, if they kill this, it's just going to make a huge token. Next up, Sylvos Rogue Elemental, 3 and triple green for an 8/5 legendary elemental with trample and 1 green regenerated. So, hard to deal with. It avoids some sweepers, not all of them, but nice card to have. Next up, Splinter Fright for 2 and a green. You get a star with trample, where its power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. That counts tokens. The tokens actually do stay in the graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, it mills 2. So this thing is just really massive, and it has trample. Stigma Lasher, 2 red for a 2/2 elemental shaman with wither. and if it deals combat damage to a player, that player can gain life for the rest of the game. So it's a really nice early game card in case someone doesn't have anything out. That way, they just can't gain more life. Next up, Sting Mogi, 3 and a red for a 0/0 elemental. It comes into play with 2 counters on it, and you can pay 3 and a red, remove a counter from it, destroy target artifact or land. Most of the time, it's probably just going to hit the lands, but it comes into play. It gets a die trigger, and it'll destroy at least 2 lands. So, next up, Sunfire Shaman, 1 and a red for a 2/1. With 1 and a red, tap it, deal X damage to target creature or player, where X is number of elementals in the graveyard. So this can kill out of nowhere, so you have to be careful about it. Thunderblast, 2 and triple red for a 7/2 with haste. It has trample as long as it has a -/- counter on it, and it's got persist. So, again, a 7/2 that becomes a 6/1 trampler is pretty good. Next up, Walker of the Grove, 6 and 2 green for a 7/7 elemental. When it leaves the battlefield, you put a 4/4 elemental onto the battlefield. So again, if they kill it, it comes back, basically. And lastly, Wilderness Elemental, 1 red green for a star 3 with trample. Its power is equal to the number of non-basics your opponents control. This is EDH. Almost everyone will at least have a few. If you're playing in a pot of 3 and each have 2 basic, non-basic lands, that's still a 6/3 trample. So, again, nice threat. That's it for all of the non-tokens. Next up, I'll move on to the tokens. Again, I couldn't. Tapped out doesn't allow you to show tokens, but I'll just basically go over them. I'm running 10 5/5 red black elementals, 40 2/2 green elementals, 20 4/4 green elementals, 12 5/3 elementals, 6 7/7 trample green elementals, 6 8/8 vigilance green white elementals, 20 1/1 elementals, 20 1/1 with haste elementals, 50 3/1 trample haste elementals, 10 7/1 trample haste elementals, 15 2/2 flying blue elementals, 6 5/5 flying blue red elementals, and 50 3/1 red elemental shamans, and 15 5/1 trample haste at the beginning of your end step sacrifice lightning rager tokens. So that's my current build of this Elemental Horde deck. Again, it's a really fun format. I really suggest trying to make a deck. Again, the thing says 100 cards, but I really suggest making it larger because, especially in Commander, doing 100 damage is actually kind of easy when a Horde is just against a few people. So, again, this is Hidden Planet X. Thank you for watching my videos. If you want, I'd really appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Yeah. As always, the links will be down below. Again, I used mtg.onl for the tokens and tapped out for the list. So, as always, hope to see you again, and goodbye.